Hello, everyone, and welcome to this education and awareness session on critical incident stress management. Uh, this is a session to learn a little bit more about the BC Parks Critical Incident Stress Management Program. Typically, this type of training would be delivered either in person, ideally, or even in a live meeting. But this recording, I'm simply sitting here by myself. There's no audience. I'm just here to record this presentation so that those people who were unable to make a meeting are able to watch this training at any time. So this is a little bit of a different platform for me. I'm used to having an audience. I am not a professional YouTuber or videographer, and it's a bit funny to just talk to a computer and go through a presentation without an audience. So I hope that this turns out well and that people enjoy watching it, even though there isn't going to be any engagement from the audience. I've turned on the transcription function here on the recording, so I hope that you're able to see that and use it for those of you who want to see the transcription. I think it might be a little bit distracting for me because I can see all the ums and likes that I say, but I will just do my best to ignore it on my screen here. So let's get into it. So this is going to be about a 45-minute presentation. I think it might be a little bit shorter actually because there is no audience and there's no questions and interaction. So we'll see how long it is at the end, I suppose. So let's get into it. So let's start with our intro here to what is critical incident stress management? What's the definition of that? So it's the world's kind of oldest and most widely used approach to understand and discuss the mental health impacts of a crisis or a disaster. So after a person or a group of people who have been in a critical type incident, there are impacts, or there can be impacts on someone who's involved in this type of incident. And so a program has been developed that's used worldwide to help mitigate the impacts to people when they've been in a crisis or a disaster. And it's a whole wide scope of tools that are used to help people who have been in a crisis or a disaster. There's a continuum kind of need involved. There's different approaches that can be taken depending on how many people are involved in the crisis or disaster, or what kind of support is needed. So it's a whole program. It's comprehensive and it has multiple steps involved. So that's what critical incident stress management is in a nutshell. And this will probably make a little bit more sense as we go and move forward through some more of this information here. So what exactly is a critical incident? So a critical incident is an unusually challenging event, so something that you wouldn't typically experience, that has the potential, so it doesn't have to, but it has the potential to create significant human distress and can overwhelm one's coping mechanisms. So we all have coping mechanisms that we use in challenging situations. We all have our own kind of unique ways of dealing with things. But when we're in a critical incident, our normal tools that we use, they don't work. Our coping mechanisms are overwhelmed, and there are symptoms that are that are not typically experienced when a critical incident occurs. So what are some types of risks of the fieldwork that we do for BC Parks? So I'll say here that this is a new program for BC Parks in 2022. We haven't had our own critical incident stress management program before. We've had access to other agencies' CISM programs, depending on where you are in the province. That could be COS, so conservation officers, or through Flinroe with the natural resource officers. They both have programs, but we haven't had one of our own before. And one thing I'll mention about these programs is that they're peer programs. So they work best when it's someone that does the same type of work or a similar type of work or is familiar with the work that you do, who can help you in this type of critical incident. So we have a new program this year, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in some later slides. But what is it about our line of work as BC Park staff? And that includes rangers and park officers, so primarily those that work in the field, that puts puts us at risk of experiencing critical incidents, because it's not necessarily something that any job would have, that you're at risk for a critical incident. It's particular to certain lines of work. So for BC Park staff, this is, we can often be first on scene to incidents or accidents that happen in a park. There's a lot of things that can happen in a park, and since we're there out in the field, we can be first on scene. Many of our staff are also involved in law enforcement, and the work that and the job duties that are required as part of law enforcement are inherently more risk to experiencing critical incidents. We're also uniformed staff, and the public can identify us and expect us to respond to certain situations and incidents that occur in a park. And we are also involved in emergency management. So these are some of the types of risks of working in the field with BC Parks that put us at higher risk of experiencing a critical incident in our day-to-day type work. So that's why we have a CISM program now, is because of the type of work that we do. We're at a higher risk, and we want to be able to support our staff should they experience a critical incident. So what are some more specific examples of critical incidents that BC Park staff might experience? So there's a wide range here. This is just a few examples. So this could be a first aid incident. Maybe it's doing CPR in a park visitor. It could be involving a fellow staff member. It could be anyone that you're working with, whether it's a colleague or a visitor in a park. Wildlife attack to, again, yourself, a colleague, or a park visitor, that could be a critical incident. Any type of vehicle accident, so whether that's a motor vehicle, an ATV, a snowmobile, a boat, these types of accidents would sometimes be considered a critical incident depending on the severity. Could be any sort of natural disasters, so an avalanche, forest fires, flooding, anything that is extreme in that way. It could be a death. It could be a death of a colleague. It could be a death of a park visitor. And then also it could include extreme or prolonged events. So again, that could be wildfire. It could be protests in a park. And there are more examples than this that are shown here that could be a critical incident. And we'll touch on this again later, but just to say here that each person experiences incidents differently. So a critical incident to one person might not be a critical incident to another, depending on their experience or themselves as a person could do with their training. So keep that in mind, that a critical incident, we've provided a definition here, but for each person that will be defined a bit differently. So what is critical incident stress? So this is the first three words of the critical incident stress management piece. So critical incident stress. So we know what a critical incident is now. What's the stress piece? So where does that come in? So critical incident stress refers to the range of physical and psychological symptoms that might be experienced by someone involved in a traumatic critical incident. So the stress part is the symptoms that occur afterward, after being in a critical incident themselves. And it's very important to point out here that critical incident stress is simply the body's normal reaction. So this is all normal to an abnormal event. So it's the event that's abnormal, not the person's reaction to it. So all normal. This is all normal in whatever way someone reacts to a critical incident. And I think we're going to get into a little bit later what some of these physical and psychological symptoms are. But we're going to talk about what crisis intervention is next. But before I move on to that, I will mention too that the symptoms that someone might occur, the purpose of this iceberg picture here is that sometimes things might be on the surface that someone's exhibiting these symptoms, but sometimes a lot of it's actually far beneath the surface. It's deep down. It's not something that you might necessarily see in a colleague or might not even identify in yourself straight away. So there's a lot of depth to critical incident stress, and it's important to know that it's not necessarily always on the surface that these things are occurring. So what do we do about it? Someone's experienced a critical incident. They're now experiencing critical incident stress. So where does CISM come in? What role does this program play in helping our colleagues? So what we have is something called crisis intervention. So we have CISM peers. We've got a team of trained staff. At the moment, we have 12 trained staff that we hope to grow in the future if we can. But we have trained staff who will work with someone who is willing to participate. It's not mandatory, this program is all voluntary in a crisis intervention. So as soon as possible after a critical incident has occurred and someone has identified or not identified that they have symptoms, you don't have to have symptoms to participate in this program. It's helpful no matter what. It is a short-term helping process. So it's acute intervention to stabilize and mitigate the crisis response. That's its purpose. So think of it kind of like mental health first aid. If you think about the analogy of what does first aid do, someone's experienced an injury. You have someone who is trained in first aid who will come in, they will help stabilize that person and get them to the help that they need if they need further assistance afterward. So this is kind of the same. We have trained staff who will come in, they will stabilize and mitigate that crisis response. Sometimes for some people that's enough, that first aid piece is enough and that's all they need. And sometimes they need more. And so that person's there to help facilitate that if needed. So the goals of it are to foster natural resiliency. So this is something that the own person who's experiencing that critical incident stress, they do the work on their own to help stabilize, to reduce those symptoms that they're experiencing. We want to help them return to adaptive functioning and also, as I mentioned, facilitation to access continued care if needed. Now, it's very important to note here that this isn't psychotherapy. This isn't the same as going to see, a certified counselor or a psychologist or any sort of formal help in that way. This is not a replacement for that. This is just that kind of initial step to kind of help. It's one piece of the puzzle, if you will. So if you've been in a critical incident, what might you expect to experience? And everyone's going to be very different. I think I've mentioned this already, but it's worth repeating that everyone experiences symptoms differently. There's a wide range of symptoms that someone can experience after a critical incident, and no two people are the same. Everybody experiences things differently. And on a different time scale as well. Some people might experience symptoms straight away after the critical incident, and others it might take hours, days, weeks, or a longer time to experience symptoms afterward. So there's a number of different categories of signs and symptoms of critical incident stress. So the first category we have here is cognitive symptoms or signs of critical incident stress. So perhaps you have or you or a coworker is having trouble concentrating. They're not able to concentrate at work. They're not able to remember things properly. They're having memory problems. Their attention span is poor. They're having difficulties with calculations or logic. They're having a hard time making decisions, or their problem solving is slowed. So there's a variety of these types of cognitive signs and symptoms that someone might experience. Again, it wouldn't necessarily be all of these. It could be one. It could be something that's not on this list. There's a wide range. So some of the emotional signs and symptoms are loss of emotional control. You don't feel like you're in control of your emotions anymore, whereas typically maybe you would feel a lot more in control of your emotions. You might be experiencing grief. You might be experiencing guilt. You might be experiencing depression, anxiety, or fear. And you might be experiencing just an overall feeling of being lost or overwhelmed. For some of the physical signs and symptoms, these could be muscle tremors, chest pain, headaches, difficulty breathing, gastrointestinal distress, or elevated blood pressure and heartbeat. For behavioral symptoms, this could be someone is excessively silent, someone who usually talks more than they are. They're quieter than usual. A sleep disturbance, they're having trouble sleeping. Unusual behaviors, so things that they just don't typically do. That someone, it's not usually something as you know them as a person that they would do. They're doing something a bit strange or different for them. Changing in eating habits, whether that's more or less. Withdrawal from contact, so someone who's typically social and involved or more engaged, they're withdrawing from others. Substance abuse, so whether that's alcohol or drugs, and changes in work habits. So again, that's kind of could be related to unusual behaviors, but changes in work habits. And then finally, there's spiritual signs and symptoms. So someone might be questioning their belief system, whatever that may be. It doesn't necessarily have to be religious, but questioning their belief system that they have. So these are some examples, signs and symptoms to watch out for. And again, these are all normal. These are all normal signs and symptoms and reactions to have to a critical incident. So if you're experiencing some of these signs and symptoms after a critical incident, there's a number of things that you can do to help with these symptoms. You don't have to be stuck in these symptoms. There's things you can do to kind of help relieve that. So again, here's kind of where the first aid piece comes in. So it's important to make sure after a critical incident that you treat yourself well and with kindness. So that includes eating well. So avoid deep fried fatty foods, excessive sugar, and of note, coffee. It's a stimulant, as we know. So, not to say don't have any, but all in moderation. And ensure you're drinking lots of water or other types of hydrating fluids. So get some exercise. So going for a long walk could be helpful. Not necessarily something that's going to be stressful for you. That would be high intensity. That might not be something that's good. But a walk or something that's kind of more low impact might be a good choice. Do something that you love. Do something that you enjoy and that provides you with energy. And this is different for everyone again. So maybe you enjoy painting, maybe you enjoy cooking, doing sports, maybe it's playing with your dog. Maybe you like to watch TV, whatever it is that you like to do something that's going to recharge your batteries and give you energy. And to rest. Rest is important. So go easy on yourself. You've been through something that's traumatic. It is a critical incident. And resting is important for your body to do at that time. And reduce unnecessary stimulation. So something like a violent movie might not be a good choice. That's very stimulating. And beware of false remedies. So alcohol and drugs, it might provide temporary relief. It might temporarily make you feel better, but they can add to new problems and it can complicate your recovery. You're not processing things in the appropriate way. They can do damage, so be mindful of that. So what can you do for your mind? So keeping it simple is important. So, don't make any big decisions at this time. Those can wait. You've been through a critical incident, or maybe it's a colleague of yours that's been through a critical incident. So it's important to identify that if you're feeling like you should make some big decisions at this time, or you are in that kind of stage of something of making a big decision, it's probably best to wait. And regarding the images or, flashbacks, if you will, whether that's visual or auditory, it's important to try to not block them out, to let them come and go, let them enter your mind and to pass through. It could be more of a disruption later if you're trying to avoid those types of images or sensations that you're experiencing. So what else can you do for your emotions? So you might be on a bit of an emotional roller coaster here. You might be one day feeling, or 1 hour or 1 minute, feeling scared, and then the next minute you're feeling anger, or maybe you're feeling guilt. So this is all normal to kind of be on that roller coaster of emotions. So just accept that this is okay. This is normal. It's expected to happen, um, and do your best to accept the roller coaster of emotions there. And if you want to cry, then cry. For some people, that's an easy thing to do, and for some people, that's a hard thing to do. So if you're feeling the need to cry, then do it. That does help. And finally, I believe finally, let me catch up to my slides here. Sorry, almost finally. You can reach out. So the BC Park CISM team is here for you. You can come and speak with us, with someone on the team, one of the team members. They're a great resource. They're there for you. That's what their purpose is, just to help you after you experienced a critical incident. But you don't have to speak with the CISM team. There's other people that you can talk to. It could be a different colleague, someone that you trust. It could be a family member or a friend, or you can seek out counseling as well if you would like to seek a professional, but it can be very beneficial to reach out to someone to talk to. And finally, after a critical incident, it's important to look after each other. And this is kind of more tailored to if you're feeling that you're not experiencing symptoms and you're feeling like you're okay, it's important to remember that a colleague, if they've experienced the same critical incident, they might experience it in a very different way. So it's important to look after one another. So make sure you're checking in with your coworkers and following up with one another after an event. And it's helpful to check in potentially a few times as well, depending on what their reaction is. And if you are noticing a change in one of your colleagues, your peers, reach out and offer support. And maybe that's support through the CISM program, or maybe that's something else, but reach out to them and make that offer. So if you do decide you need to access CISM, this can be done in a few different ways, by the way, that CISM can be activated, if you will. So you can reach out at any time yourself to a CISM team member if you're feeling that you're experiencing critical incident stress or you need some support for critical incidents. You can reach out to them at any time, but somebody else might also contact CISM on your behalf. So if there has been a critical incident in a park, maybe it's your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor or the RD, whoever it is, they might contact the CISM team to activate them to ensure that they're informed that something's occurred and their services are needed. So it could come about in a couple of different ways where CISM is activated for a critical incident, but know that you as an individual are welcome to reach out to CISM, a CISM team member, any of them at any time. There's a couple of caveats that we'll get to, though, I suppose. So what happens in terms of this CISM process, in terms of kind of activating the CISM team, if you will? So a critical incident has occurred. A CISM team member is contacted by someone, whether that's you or someone else or a supervisor. They'll contact a CISM team member. There is a preference for someone who's local to your area if in-person support is required, of course, just simply because of travel reasons. They're closer, but you can reach out to anyone. And there's certain CISM crisis interventions that can be done over the phone or over a video call, but in person is definitely better and preferred if it's an option. So you or whoever has contacted them will just briefly share what happened and what's known. This isn't getting into the details. It's just for them to know how many people are involved and generally what happened, because depending on how many people are involved or the type of situation, they will activate a different type of crisis intervention for that. They might need more team members, for example, to help come and support if it's a big incident. Then you'll determine a location, a date, and a time to meet with the CISM team member. And again, this is best done as close to the critical incident as possible. It's most effective the closer it is to the time of when the critical incident occurred. But as soon as possible might mean, it could mean that same day, it might be the next day, it might be in a couple of days' time, depending on the situation and what's happened. So the CISM team is gathered or assembled if a team is required, if more than one person is required, or maybe it's just one. And then the crisis intervention will occur. So a CISM session, whichever kind of lingo you prefer, so that will happen. They're usually pretty short. They're not meant to be long, like we mentioned before. It's kind of a short-term helping process. It's not meant to be like an hours-long discussion with a one-on-one person. It's meant to be quite brief. So 20 minutes to 30 minutes, if my memory serves me correctly. And then after that, after the session is done, the CISM team member will follow up with the staff, whether that's an individual or the group, to check in and see how everybody's doing. And a note here that if there is further referral to additional treatment, that can happen at any point in time if a CISM team member or somebody identifies that, that the first aid isn't going to be sufficient, that somebody needs a professional to assist them in this case. So I won't necessarily mention absolutely everything that's on this slide. This is just to demonstrate that there's a number of different types of interventions that can occur. So there's individual interventions and there's group interventions. So it could be a one-on-one, or it could be a CISM team member with a group of staff who have experienced a critical incident. So the individual ones, I believe they're kind of the most common type of intervention that occurs. It's one-on-one session with a CISM team member. And then we've got a couple of different kinds of group sessions. So we've got informational ones where it's a CISM team member that's addressing a group and providing them with information, and it's not interactive in that the group is providing or having a discussion or a conversation. It's simply for information, and they would provide some of the same material that I would provide today, but perhaps in a bit more detail and or a different context depending on the incident, just of how to kind of take care of yourself and what the next steps are for ensuring that you're recovering as best as you can from the critical incident. And then the other type of group intervention is an interactive session. So that's either a diffusing or a debriefing, and it has an interactive component to it for those who were involved in the critical incident who do want to share. And that would be something that's organized by the CISM team. So what can you expect from CISM or from an intervention that occurs? So CISM is voluntary, so that's important. Nobody has to participate in this. If a critical incident has happened, or you're and a colleague don't want to participate in CISM, then that's totally fine. You do not have to. It's all voluntary. We're just here to help you if you would like that type of help. It's confidential, so no one is going to know what has happened in these sessions. None of the information is shared. No notes are taken. It's not documented. We do track just how many times CISM is used, but that's it. We don't mention who's involved in that at all. So it's a safe place to share. So you can say what you'd like. It's again, we're just here for you to provide a lot of listening and support and information for you as well. And it's a good way to learn about stress and effective coping mechanisms. So what CISM is not, it's not a critique, an operational critique or an investigation of what happened during the critical incident. Yes, they will ask you what happened, but we're not looking to know that for any other agenda over what's going on there. So for helping you, for the purposes of helping you. So it's not meant to be a blame session in any way. And it's certainly not a therapy session. It's not a replacement for therapy or treatment. So again, not a substitute for psychotherapy. It isn't psychotherapy. It's a short-term helping process to help staff recover after a critical incident. So this is currently our team, all of our amazing CISM team members who we got on board this year. So we've all taken 27 hours of training to CISM team members, and it was really great training, and we learned a lot. And we're all glad that we're here and we can help BC Parks and our staff if they've experienced a critical incident. So you can come back and note who these folks are if you'd like. And I've also recently got a brochure done up here that will be available as well, and it has everybody's contact information on the back here. And I don't think I actually introduced myself at the beginning as the coordinator for CISM, and I'm in the middle of switching positions, so it's a bit funny timing because I'm not sure I'll be the CISM coordinator as you're watching this video, but I think I've got a slide coming up of kind of what's happening next, and I'll let you know where you can find all this information a little bit later on. And this is where a little bit more detailed information on the CISM team members as of when this was recorded, which is August 5th, 2022. So as mentioned previously, accessing the BC Parks CISM team, any staff member can reach out to any CISM team member at any time. So you can phone them, you can send them an email. And depending on the team member's relationship to the incidents or the individuals, it's possible that another team member might be contacted and assigned to manage the intervention. If someone's too kind of close to that incident, it's not effective for them to also provide support, so we would find somebody else. And then again, that it's best if CISM support is provided as soon as possible after the incident. That's when it's most effective. But the response might not be immediate from the CISM team. And an important thing to kind of note here and be aware of is that CISM team members they're not on call. So when I say you can call them at any time, I should clarify that you can contact them at any time, but they might not respond to you until their working hours. So if they work, like a Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4 kind of schedule, then they might not respond to you straight away outside of those hours. So we've got this program in place, and this is kind of the best that we have established at this point in time, just based on the kind of agreements we have with staff or the staffing hours that we have in place. So whether you're needing support and it's outside hours, or you're feeling like you don't want to use the BC Parks CISM program for support, there are other resources that you can use. And the primary one that is recommended is contacting the WorkSafe BC Critical Incident Response. So they have trained staff who are specialized in responding to critical incidents. And there's a phone number here that's on the screen, and they're open from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. So they're a little bit more available than our CISM peers are. So it's a free service. Anyone can call them. They do their best to provide service after you've called within 24 to 72 hours after an incident. So they're pretty quick to respond. And it's free. It's free for staff who've experienced a critical incident. Another option is RCMP Victim Services if the critical incident involves the person being a victim of a crime. And this one is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this one has an email and the phone number you can also text as well. And it's important that this is changed from our previous training that we did at Ranger training. So this is different. If you're speaking with someone that did previous training, this has changed. That we do not recommend as a CISM program and as an agency that staff reach out to the PSA Employee and Family Services. So like LifeWorks is our current provider that provides short-term counseling, because if you contact them, they don't have the counselors that you would call, they don't have specialized training in trauma counseling. And so they're not able to assist staff in a proper way. And it's possible that they could do more damage than good because they don't have that specialized training. So that's important to note. It might be an appropriate resource to use a little bit later on down the road, but not immediately after a critical incident. So what's coming next? So as I mentioned, this is the first year of the BC Parks CISM program. So previously staff have had access to other programs, but now we have our own. So there are a few more kind of things still to be figured out at the time of the recording of this training session. So there is a brochure that's now been established, so that will be posted. We do have guidelines that are nearing completion but are not quite complete yet. So those will still be yet to be formalized for in terms of how our program will operate. And then finally, all of this information is going to be housed on the Park Ranger intranet site. And maybe you already know that because this is where you found the video, but that's where all the information will live. So there'll be, copies of this training, the brochure, the guidelines once they're done, the names and contact info for the CISM team members. And then as well, we'll make sure we have a bit of information on the additional resources as well. And the program will likely continue to evolve over time, given this is our first year and we're still filling out how kind of the program works for BC Parks. Oh, I didn't take this slide out because this was something that we would typically do, but it's just me here today. But if you do have any questions, for now, send them to me, I suppose. Although check on the website if you're watching this video on the Park Ranger intranet site and see if the CISM coordinator has changed to somebody else, and they would be a person you can reach out to. Otherwise, you can look at the list of names of all the CISM team members and you can reach out to any one of them with your questions about the program. And if it's not something that they are able to respond, they will contact the CISM coordinator. And I guess I should also mention that it's possible that some of the CISM team members will have changed while this video exists on the Park Ranger intranet site. So make sure that you're looking at the intranet site with the current CISM team members for the most up-to-date information on who the CISM team members are. And I think that's it. So thanks for watching. I feel like I should be saying like and subscribe or something at the end of the video because I feel like I'm like a YouTuber or something right now, but I'm not. But anyway, it was a pleasure presenting this to you, and I hope that you learned a few things. And I'm so glad that we have a CISM program with BC Parks now. So yeah, I hope none of you ever need to use it, but if you do, I'm glad that it's here for you. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.